Divas, welcome back. Today's episode, special guest. She's back, the former Senate President and now Senator Kathleen Passidomo. We had a blast with her this morning and talked about all kinds of things coming up in the 2025 legislative session, including, but not limited to, condos. You might want to listen to what she had to say about the Live Local issue. That was one of her priorities. We talk about all of that and much, much more. Senator Kathleen Passidomo, welcome back to the show.
Everybody handles tragedy in a different way. My way is to keep really busy because if I sit still, I start thinking and then I spiral. But if I'm keeping busy and doing things that are really important to me and my constituents, I feel good about it. That's how I handle it. I don't stop.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Divas, we are back with, I like to call her friend of the show. Are you a friend of the show?
Absolutely.
Okay. I still call her Madam President, former Senate President Kathleen Passidomo, former as of a month ago, a little bit, right. But once a president, always a president. Welcome back to Deeper Dive.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we did bring our little show on the road today. We are inside President Passidomo.
I would prefer Kathleen, but I suppose that's not right. So whatever you want to call me, Senator,
everybody calls you KP.
KP that's
How about if I call you KP? That has a little bit of folksy, and then it's not too
KP's good.
Disrespectful.
Perfect.
Okay, we're in her office. She's got all the. Let me just describe it a little bit. She's got all these football helmets and footballs and lots of pictures and
tasteful.
It's very tastefully done. It is very tastefully decorated. We could probably use a tip from you in the speakeasy. Maybe we'll get you to come over and give us some decorating tips. This was a tough election season, not for Republicans. Republicans really fared very well. Now we're gearing up for the 2025 legislative session. That's why you're in the Capitol today. You served 2 years as Senate President. It's not common for presidents to come back and go back on the floor, as we call it, right? What are some of the biggest lessons that you learned as Senate President?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'll probably take an hour to answer it. You know, I love the Florida Senate. From the day that I was elected and walked onto the Senate floor, I felt so honored and thrilled to be here. And so I'm trying to answer your question, but it's kind of
we do the weave. We do the weave. So do the weave.
So, leading up to the presidency, I became so involved in the Senate and operations of the Senate and the Senate culture and the Senate family. And so, the lessons that I learned were really all these years of serving with some of the most amazing people, working with probably the best staff in the country. And, I learned how to work collaboratively with all of my colleagues. And so the main lesson is just working together. We came up with some really significant legislation, and we passed significant budgets that did a lot of good things for the people of our state. And so, I feel really, really positive about our direction as we move forward.
You're a former Senate President. There's going to be, seems very unusual to me. You may be more of a historian of the Senate. Probably you are than I am. But there's another former Senate President who is going to be a freshman. He's not going to be finishing out his term. That is Senator, I almost called him Matt Gaetz, Don Gaetz. And he's very strong personality, I think is a fair way of characterizing it. So what's it going to be like with, 40 Somalian warlords and 2 former Somalian whatever kings, I guess?
I think President Albritton, I think the world of him. And I think he's going to be a really good president. And thoughtful, caring president. So out of respect for him, and Senator Gates and I have had this conversation, we would like people to call us senator, because there really is only one president at a time. Even though we're former president, it's really hard to get people to stop calling me President Passidomo.
As I did when I walked in here.
Yeah, but I want people to appreciate there is only one senator at a time. And out of respect for him, I've asked people to call me senator. Actually, I've asked everybody to call me KP, but they won't. So
except for me, because I break all the rules.
Well, some of my, I call them permanent friends that are here in Tallahassee do call me KP. But, it's just a respect for the sitting president. Because we could, at some point, we could have, when you think about it, President Albritton could serve 2 more years after, because he just got reelected.
That's true.
So you could have a whole rotation of former presidents, and then it really, I think, diminishes the current title.
So you all have had a little chit chat beforehand and said, look, we're going to do that. How hard is it for you personally? Is it going to be to not say like, oh, you should be, this, that, or
that's a different story. The good part is that President Albritton and I have a lot of the same philosophy of life and governance. And so I feel really comfortable, working with him and becoming an officious intermeddler, as I call it, in some of the bills.
Intermeddler, that's great.
Yeah, and in everyone's bills. But it is different. It's so funny this morning as I walked out of the elevator, normally I would go left into the president's office, and I walked out and I said, oh, I got to go right.
That's right.
To go to the Rural Suite. It's a challenge, but it's one that I relish. And to be honest with you, I had a difficult discussion about whether I should stay my 2 years. Everybody other than former President Gates, and I think Pruitt maybe, left after, even if they had additional time on their term, left because it's a hard thing to do. But my husband and I had talked about it last spring, because obviously if I was going to resign, you'd want to get into the cycle of the election. But he said, well, what are you going to do? You don't want to go back to practicing law. You love the Senate. Stay. And I'm really glad that I stayed, because I would have had a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to be really busy, I'm told. And President Albritton has said to me, you're going to be really busy, so don't worry about anything.
You've spoken about this, so I don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but you mentioned your husband's unexpected and horrific passing during the opening day, and you were kind enough to give remarks to an event that the news service held last month. I can't imagine, yes, it's good that you have something to, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm thinking, you have this, I don't want to call it a distraction because it's an important job and you're surrounded by important people doing important things and people who care about you and an institution that you care about. At the same time, this major loss that you're experiencing, it hasn't even been it's just been months still.
Everybody handles tragedy in a different way. My way is to keep really busy, because if I sit still, I start thinking and then I spiral. But if I'm keeping busy and doing things that are really important to me and my constituents, I feel good about it. That's how I handle it, is I don't stop. And I'm really thrilled that I have the opportunity to be the rules chair, because, as you know, I love policy. I'm starting to read all the bills that have been filed, and it's just...
We'll talk about the bills in a second, and we'll talk about the legislative session in a second. While we're on personal stuff, I think it's okay if I ask you. I heard that you had a major family event recently.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
My youngest daughter, Gabby, was married. We had a very small ceremony in Naples just before Thanksgiving. So her siblings, so I have 3 daughters and their spouses were there, and Gabby's close friends and her now husband Wilson's close friends, and of course his family. Very small, 20 people. It was on the beach in Naples. You couldn't have had a more wonderful event. She was gorgeous. She is gorgeous.
Yes, she is gorgeous.
And then we had a celebration here in Tallahassee, and I joked because his last name is Smith. And if you look at the phone book, almost everybody in Tallahassee with the name of Smith, they're all related. So they were all there. So it was this giant group
Oh,
of
that's funny.
Smiths.
He's a Tallahassee person.
He grew up here. His
I see.
family had been here. And that's why we had a party here this past weekend. The only problem, it was like 30 degrees and we were outside.
Oh, was that cold?
Friday
oh my
night. Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, we were all huddled. But, it ended up being just a really joyful event for her. And then my family came from all over the country.
Yeah.
And that was great.
It must have been hard too.
It was hard. Yeah, it was hard, but you just have to power through it and realize this is not about me. This is about her and her future together. And you have to look at it this is a new beginning for her. And so her sisters and I were there to celebrate her new life. And we absolutely adore Wilson. I joked in my remarks that when I first met him, he came down to Naples in his truck with his toolkit and he did my honeydew list, which was 45 years long. my husband, John, was the most wonderful man in the world, but his idea of home improvement was when the light bulb went out on his side of the bed, he'd take it and come over to mine and unscrew mine and put it in his.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so that was...
Congratulations on Gabby's, on the new addition to the family. And thank you for sharing that with us. And I say you're going back to the Senate and the transition, but you will be rules chair, which is like the second most powerful person in the Senate. And you have quite a bit of authority in terms of scheduling bills and things like that, right?
Well, of course, but you have to recognize that the president makes all the decisions. As I did the last 2 years, my rules chair came to me with any issue that needed to have action. And I will do the same with President Albritton. As I said earlier, because we have a lot of similarities in our outlook, I feel really comfortable about going to him and say, well, this bill has issues, this one I really have problems with, or this one's great, or whatever. So that's important. But also he has initiatives that I know he spoke with you about some of them, and I applaud them and I support them, and I'm going to do everything I can to help him get his initiatives across the finish line, as he helped me as majority leader get my initiatives across the finish line over the last 2 years. So I think it's going to be a very collaborative relationship, and I'm looking forward to working with him.
You've got some changes coming up in the Senate, too. You have a Senator Randy Fine, who will be here for, I guess, about half of the legislative session. And then he's already submitted his resignation to run for CD6 that's being vacated by U.S. Rep. Mike Waltz. He has filed a bill that would undo something. I don't know, and I should have looked this up, but I believe you were in the legislature when this passed.
I actually voted against the bill.
Did you?
And I'll tell you why. And I do feel...
Let's tell our listeners what it does first.
It was a bill that provided in-state tuition to... It was called the Dreamers Bill, undocumented immigrants. So when the bill was presented to us in the House, it was... And I got the concept. Children that came over here, not of their own volition, brought here by their parents. And this is how it was presented. They were 2 years old, 3 years old. They were infants, or they were, 5 years old, or whatever. That is no fault of their own. We educated them through an entire system, elementary school, middle school, high school. It makes sense to allow them to continue their educational careers in college, because we have educated them. We've paid for that. For all intents and purposes, they're part of our community. The problem is that's not what the bill ended up with. What it ended up with was, I think it was 3 years. If you had been in Florida school for 3 years or less, 3 years or less, then you would get in-state tuition. So my argument was someone can come over at age 15 or 16, which could be on their own volition, go to high school for 3 years and then get in-state tuition.
I think it was at least 3 years. Yeah. Not 3 years or less, because I don't think you could have been in for 1 year.
Yeah, 3 years.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. So, I just want to make sure that we're...
I always get these things.
I know. I do too. I do the same thing.
I'm getting old.
No, you're...
So the philosophy of...
It was a priority. Let me remind everyone that it was a priority of then Speaker Will Weatherford.
And the thing about it is, the concept of the dreamers, I get that. I use the argument because we weren't even talking about somebody from South America or Cuba or whatever. It was, what if an Italian kid came over in 10th grade and we educate him, could get in-state tuition, could be a wealthy Italian kid. I didn't think that was appropriate. That being said, we did it. It passed. And I don't personally, I'm uncomfortable changing it. I have not.
Oh, that's interesting.
I have not seen the bill because people have begun to rely on it. It's really hard once you put in something and people begin to rely on it. It's really hard to
changing the rules midway through the game.
It is. So I don't know. I haven't read the bill, so I don't know what it does. I've heard about it. I just philosophically, I think, the time frame is what the issue was.
So do you think that would pass? You said where you stand on it philosophically. Do you think there's an appetite to pass that?
I have no idea. This is the first time it's been filed.
I see.
So I don't know what the members think. Here's the other problem. If Senator Fine leaves in the middle of the session, I don't see how he's going to get a bill like that through both the House and the Senate.
It's one of those that would be maybe the last.
Yeah, I really don't know. We'll see what happens.
Do you think that bill would have passed today?
It depends on how it was presented. I do believe that if a young child comes here, as a baby or an infant, and we educate them because we have to, it's the law, it doesn't make sense not to continue, particularly because they're really smart kids. And nowadays it's really hard to get into college. So it's not like, we're going to have someone who wouldn't qualify. So none of that makes sense. I think you just have to look at it logically. And what is common sense? Let's just put common sense back into our
There's
system.
so much about immigration, though. It's such an emotional issue now, and it's become such a political hot potato that I wonder myself if that bill would pass today.
Well, here's the thing.
Even if it was a priority of a leader.
Here's the thing. It's part of a larger discussion. Our immigration system is broken.
That's true.
And we've had opportunities to repair it. Even when I was in the House, when I first was elected, the discussion was, why don't we have a guest worker program? Why don't we document people, give them the ability to work here, have them pay taxes, have them, be part of the community, but don't automatically give them citizenship if you're here illegally. We've been talking about that for years, but nobody will do it. I don't know why.
And we will be right back with Senator Kathleen Passidomo. We're introducing a new feature this week. I'm calling it the News in Haikus. You remember those little poems, 3-line poems, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And I will admit that this is not an original idea. I kind of stole it from a podcast I listened to on the BBC. But the News in Haikus. Elections happened. Now dominoes are falling. Popcorn emojis. That was your introduction to the News in Haikus. Send us your News in Haikus to podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. And we're back with Senator Kathleen Passidomo. So what are the other legislative issues? There was a bill that I saw that I think got a lot of attention about changing the weather.
Somebody ought to read it.
I haven't read it. I'm admitting.
Okay, I think, and I'm not sure where this, I know where this is coming from. There's this whole new discussion out there that I'm getting emails from constituents about airplanes that are somehow, I forget what the term is.
Seeding, like they're seeding.
Well, the seeding the clouds is one thing for hurricanes or whatever. But what I think what's coming out, and I'm hearing this more and more about airplanes that are somehow, it's some kind of chemical as they, when they're flying and you see a trail of smoke, something coming out. There are comments from people that it's spewing some toxic chemical. And I think that's part of it. And I
Okay.
really don't know.
All right.
It's all of a sudden just, I'm hearing it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't
Okay.
know what this is. And I read the bill. I'm a little confused, but I'm going to talk to Senator Garcia and find out what she really wants.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. I thought maybe you could give us some insight into that. Well, there's another issue that's taking up a lot more volume in the political discourse. People are panicking, lots of stories about the condo situation.
Yeah.
So I went back and I read your memo about the condo that you sent out when the governor said that you needed to do a special session ASAP. And you were still president, and I think it was in August that you sent that memo out. You said, look, here's the reasons why we're not going to have a special session,
Right.
and here's why we needed to do this. Can we talk a little bit about, if anything, you expect to see coming up this session and what the bill did?
Yeah, I think there's going to be, and there needs to be, a robust discussion on how we handle the issue of these older condominium buildings that are deteriorating to the point where they're unsafe. Two issues that are overarching to me. Number one is, we require these inspection reports. What I see happening is a lot of misunderstanding and misperception in the whole inspection arena. First of all, we have inspectors that, out of an abundance of caution, sort of remind me of doctors, how, when you go in to see somebody, they do a million tests because they
Right.
don't want to get malpractice claims.
Right.
So I think a lot of these engineers are going way beyond where
Overboard.
some of them, I shouldn't say a lot. So that's number one. And there's a lot of angst caused by that. I'm not sure we've actually detailed the kind of things to be inspected.
Oh, that's interesting.
Secondly, the inspection, these are required reports, and there are requirements to start putting in place reserves to cover these expenditures. But some of these associations are under the impression that they have to get 100% of the money there today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the case. For example, the inspection reports, there's a roof on the building that's 15 years old today, and it's got another 15 years left of life. That does not mean they have to have the entire amount to replace the roof today in the account today, because they have 15 years to start saving to have enough to replace it when it's due. So we have to go and start looking at the remaining life of these structural components. And a lot of these condo directors are thinking, we got to have all the money here today. And that's not the case. There's also a concern that they're going to go to jail or something if they don't do it. I don't believe there's an intent to go after them. But the problem is, once right now to actually have some kind of action to put these people in jail or to whatever. But once you discover that there's a defect that is life-threatening or could cause the building to have some severe structural damage, it doesn't make sense to not do anything. I mean, that's the first sort of overarching discussion. The second is, how do we pay for this?
Right.
I have heard time and time again, I'm on a fixed income. I've lived here for 20 years, and I can't afford to start paying to make these repairs. I have complete sympathy for people in that position. But I also say, I don't understand why you didn't start thinking about keeping these buildings up.
Could it be because the legislature allowed them to have waivers? I mean, does the legislature bear some of the responsibility for, because my understanding is that now these waivers are the default for condo associations.
Not in all cases.
Okay.
That's the misunderstanding.
Okay.
Because I used to practice real estate development law. I would say the majority of the projects I worked on, after the turnover to the unit owners, the first thing they started doing is collecting reserves. It's kind of pockets of places around the state where they routinely waived reserves.
Okay. I believe, right.
But here's the thing. If you own a house, you maintain it. I hopefully.
Right.
A lot of condo owners don't really think it through in terms of they own an undivided share based upon the number of units in the whole building. And your responsibility is to make sure that building is maintained. And whether they waive reserve or not, right now, a lot of people are coming back to the legislature and saying, we don't have the money, so we want you to pay for it. I don't think that's appropriate.
That seems inequitable to me because nobody's helping me to pay for the new roof on my 60-year-old, on my 80-year-old house.
That's what I hear. And I do sympathize with people on fixed incomes, but when they bought their units, they 20, 30 years ago, they probably should have thought about, even if you waive reserves, you still have to maintain it. And in a lot of these buildings, they're not even maintaining them. What they're doing is cosmetic things. You have some of these boards that are spending a ton of money to make the lobbies look pretty.
Those, especially with the hotel condos.
And don't think about the structural components. So getting back to your question about what we expect, I think we're going to have a lot of discussion about that and why we shouldn't have a special session, because it's not an emergency,
right?
Because we're still working our way through the process. And do we give grace to these condo owners to give them more time? I don't know. I mean, there's some buildings that have actually been condemned by the local governments because they are in danger of falling down. And think about this: if we don't do anything, or if these condo owners don't do anything, and then we have another Surfside,
I don't want to use this. I'm not going to say the term that you know what I'm thinking of. But you don't want that on your conscience, right?
Nobody does.
Yeah. And I think that Speaker Perez has been very outspoken about, like, not on my watch. That's not going to happen.
I understand where
we're not going to have another Surfside. But during this session, so special session aside, do you expect to come back and address it, or do you think that?
I hope so. I mean, I think we have to have the discussion. We need to just put all the cards on the table on how do we deal with this. There's been a lot of discussion about should we do some loans to
low interest loans, for example.
Here's my concern with that. Once you start doing that, what happens if they don't pay? So you're going to have the legislature foreclose on a bunch of fixed income residents. Yeah. That makes no sense, because what will happen is they'll come back and say, well, we want loan forgiveness. And I've been adamant in my position on the loans that we gave after the hurricane to some of the local governments, that these are loans. We expect them to be paid back. And there has been some discussion or requests about loan forgiveness, and I said I don't approve of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's me personally. I don't know what
ideologically.
Yeah. So once you start doing that, we'll be doing it all over the state. And the state of Florida should not be a banker.
And then if you think about places like, very high-end luxury condos,
right, and some are different than others,
right.
I think we just have to roll up our sleeves and look at some creative solutions. And here's the other thing, too. Some of these buildings that were built 50, 60 years ago are in some really great locations, and they haven't been maintained. So this is the challenge. The people who live there are living on basically a gold mine, because the value is so high. They may have paid,
whatever,
$30,000 or $40,000 for their unit back in the 40s and the 50s and the 50s. Now they're worth a couple of million. So here's the problem: they can sell, because what will happen is somebody will come in and rehab or redevelop all those.
Sure.
They can sell, cash out. Where do they go?
That's my question to you. That was I love when you answer my questions.
That's my question too. Where do they go? Because now they have a big chunk of change. They don't want to leave their community. I don't know the answer to that. I really wish I did, but I want to have a discussion about it, and maybe somebody can come up with some answers. So some of the other things that have been floating around. So some of these developers could, take on one building, rehab it, and these owners can move to another building, and that there's all kinds of things. We just have to talk about it. We can't do it in like 30 days or whatever. We have to spend some time and having a special session to just you just won't be able to get it done. And there are a lot of really smart people out there that we need to have a big tent, and we need to get all these smart people in there to give ideas.
Right. Well, something else, I was talking to someone who's a condo owner, friend of mine, who's in the process, and she was saying, I live in this condo. What is my incentive to pay for a new, say this is someone in my age or around my age, older.
Right.
What is my incentive to make sure that there's a good roof 30 years from now? Why should I be paying for some future person, property owner, condo owner's roof?
Well, think about this it's the same thing if you owned a house. If you don't keep your roof up when you go to sell your house, it's going to have a lower purchase price, a sale price. This is the same thing.
But that's a decision you can make.
Yeah, but it's not a safety issue like with these condos.
Right.
Here's the other thing. I hear that a lot, from a lot of the people who've lived there for a long time. I didn't think I'd be here this long.
Right.
Well, they're still here. So when they moved in 20 years ago and they didn't start saving because they didn't think they'd be here, but they are here and now they can't sell, or if they sell, it has to be at a discount, or it's not safe. So that kind of discussion it can only really apply to somebody who just moved in last week and got stuck.
Okay, well, so keep watching, TB discussed, or maybe not. There's no easy way out of this situation.
No.
What other legislation do you think will be dominating? Make some news here. Tell us what you've got. You did live local, live healthy. Those were your priorities as Senate President. Do you have any priority bills going into this session, or what do you think the focus of this session will be?
Well, just kind of wrap up my live bills.
Sure.
We also had Learn Local, and that was dereg. And
right. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm really excited that Senator Simon and Senator Colaudio want to continue that trend, because with our universal school choice, we're having more and more options for our students. I don't want the traditional public school system to lag behind. So leveling the playing field as much as possible while keeping accountability is really important, not only to me, but I think to our families. So that's I'd like to see that, and I believe President Albritton wants to continue that trend. The Live Local, there's constant issues arising where some local governments are trying to opt out. They don't want to do it. And it's really tragic because it's more of a NIMBYism than anything else.
This is the workforce housing,
right.
Was the goal of it,
right.
But there are local governments that are balking.
Yeah, they're quote opting out, saying, well, we don't need workforce housing. We have to address it. When I thought of the concept, I naively thought that most local government would embrace it, because, and we had a lot of aspirational language in there. We had some preemption language, but most of it was aspirational, that they would embrace it because, the everyday, it's really the everyday worker, the missing middle, the secretary, the administrators who work for the local governments, the people who work in the hospitals, the people who work with us every day, white collar workers mainly, clerical people, have no place to live. And
I don't know how young people can afford, without inherited wealth.
Right.
How do you enter the housing market?
And it takes
forget about buying.
That's right. And so I thought local governments would embrace it, because then the people who work for them have places to live near where they work, but also cuts down on traffic on the roads. It also cuts down on kids being home alone because the parents don't have hour-long commutes. I mean, there's so many positives, and it drives me crazy. I try to explain it to people, and it falls on deaf ears, and the selfishness is astounding.
So were you surprised at that?
I was very surprised. One county commissioner just was threatening me about how we're going to ignore you, we're going to sue you. personally, and I'm like, go for it.
Can you tell us what county?
No, I'm not.
Not the name of the person.
No, I just.
So you want to see more buy-in from the local government?
I do. I want them to
Do you think that's something that you'll try to work on this year?
Yeah, I want to be able to sit in front of them and say, do you understand who we're talking about? And when I say it, they go, oh. So if somebody goes to law school today, graduates from law school, gets a job at the state attorney's office, and we pay okay, but it's not great, and it is what it is. They're the missing middle. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great to have a lawyer living next door to you, or a law enforcement
Maybe not,
or a nurse, or a teacher,
a nurse, yes,
or the bank teller, or somebody that's just starting out in life. And I every time I see that Hobby Lobby commercial, which I see a million times with the older couple, or putting together the two young people with the Christmas cards.
My gosh.
I think about that.
You're talking to me. My neighbor, I ordered a sofa. My neighbor, who's a really close friend of mine, and her husband came over and spent an hour and a half putting the sofa together and doing that for me. So I am that lady.
So that's what I envision. That's what brings us together, not, we don't want you. And so anyway, I want that. And then, of course, President Albright has a great program, the Rural Renaissance. I love that program.
I don't know can you give us flesh out a little bit? He talked about that from a very high level, and I'm not sure exactly. I think it involves feeding people.
It's not just that.
Okay.
If you look at the center of our state, it's all rural, and it goes all the way from like Immokalee up through the center of the state, turns left to the Panhandle, basically following the wildlife corridor.
I was just going to say, sounds like the wildlife corridor.
Yeah, it follows the wildlife corridor. And these are communities that are the backbone of our state. Mm-hmm. They're the people that are farmers. Mm-hmm. They're our ranchers. They are generational Floridians. Mm-hmm. Our economy in our rural communities has been kind of left behind as we've grown along each coast.
Have you driven through, say, Old Town recently?
Yeah.
Have you driven through downtown Quincy recently? There's nothing.
I know.
Boarded up windows.
I know.
There's
and
no.
I know. And it used to be before the interstates, when our winter visitors would come to Florida, they would take those rural roads and they would stop in those little mom and pop motels. They all look the same. They're all like, U-shaped,
yes,
pool in the middle, and the rooms around it, and a little restaurant in the end.
Yes.
And that was old Florida. When the interstates opened and the chain hotels opened, that started drying up, and then people started leaving because there was no opportunities for young people. So what he sees, and when I listen to him, I get very excited. He sees the economic development of our rural communities the way they want to develop. It's not people, because he's from there.
Right.
So it's not people from the coast coming in and say, we want to do X, we're going to build
the carpetbaggers.
Yeah. It's how do you want to develop, and what tools can we give you? So I always throw out the first one, broadband. Mm-hmm. In a lot of our rural communities, they don't even have internet.
I know it.
So the schools
Try driving through Perry. You can't really you lose your cell phone coverage.
Exactly. So getting broadband in there, having our schools be geared to providing occupational education for the students who live there. Once you build these things, people will come. So a young family that wants acreage, there's nowhere else to go but the center of our state anymore. You can work from home if you have broadband. Kids can go to school if the schools are really good. And then you'll have restaurants, you'll have shopping, and all the things but you have to build.
Okay, so you start with broadband, but then what is your economic base? I mean, you have to have not everybody's going to work from home.
Right.
So, you have prisons, there's problems with the prisons. Not everybody wants to work in a prison. You have the paper mill shut down in Taylor County. Right. So the manufacturing has gone away. But
it can come back in different ways. technology is the new future. I used to joke that we should set up some chip factories, and things like that. We have to be creative. We have to be thoughtful, and that's where President Albritton's going, is to think about how to grow our rural communities. What are the educational opportunities that can be provided so people can get jobs? How do we bring jobs in? And he's looking at that.
I guess that's what I'm saying is you can educate them to get jobs, but you have to have something to offer them when they get that education.
And that's what they're looking at. And that's and it's going to take time. It's not like tomorrow we're going to build. We're not, building prisons is not the answer. I mean, we do need new prisons, but building prisons is not the kind of jobs we're looking for there.
No, I'm just saying that some of these communities you're talking about, that is the main economic driver in them right now.
But there can be more.
Sure.
And there should be more.
Well, the ecotourism too, because these are really lovely, as the wildlife corridor
I've been saying that for years.
These are lovely parts of the state.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, that's why I wanted to build the bike path along the corridor so that we could have tourists that would access it. And I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done. And so I think his initiative is just really marvelous. The other thing is, too, a lot of people aren't going to go into the rural community without good health care. So we started Live Healthy of how do we start getting healthcare personnel to our rural communities. And that's the loan forgiveness program and all those kind of things. So once you start focusing on it, then I think it'll make a big difference. What I don't want to see is concrete from Fort Myers to Fort Lauderdale throughout the center of the state.
Either.
So we have to make sure that our ranchers can continue to ranch and our farmers can continue to farm. And we're doing that through our conservation easements and through our land purchases where they continue to operate. They cash out, but they continue to have their operations. And, that's a good business because we are still the winter vegetable capital of the Northeast. Mm-hmm. And do we want to lose that? So anyway, I'm very excited about his initiative.
I'm excited about that too. They're closing their computers. So that means that we're getting close to...
Yeah, I have ethics training today.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a couple of fun questions.
Okay.
Mar-a-Lago is the center. This is not a fun question. This is a serious question.
I've never been there, so I don't.
Okay. It's the center of the political universe right now. His picks have caused the political dominoes. How much of an impact do you think that the president and his nominations or his administration will have on the legislative session?
Well, it depends on what happens. I think we'll know more, after the first of the year. So, as we say, the jury's out until we know more. What
do you think Governor DeSantis will be fulfilling his last 2 years in office?
I have no idea. I really don't. I don't. My focus is on our state, and I said to him the other night that no matter what he does, whether he goes or stays or whatever, he's still my governor. And I think he's done a marvelous job, and we'll just see what happens.
Property insurance, any insights into property insurance? Did I say fun? We are going to get to fun. No,
that's not fun.
I promise.
Well, no, I mean, you know what? The reinsurance market is robust now. Companies are coming back into the state. Even notwithstanding the last 2 hurricanes, some of the rates are stabilizing. Some have gone down. They're never going to be the way they were. What a lot of people don't appreciate or understand is that this is all over the country. This is not just Florida. Everybody's insurance is skyrocketing.
We talked about gravy and sauce last time. We've got the holidays coming up. You've got some Christmas decorations here. And I was just wondering what your traditions are. Do you do the Feast of the Seven Fishes on Christmas Eve? Or can you give us a recipe or tell us what your traditions are?
Yeah, we used to do the 7 fish. I don't know what I'm going to do this year.
Right.
When my father was alive, we would do it. But, it's real simple. Anything that has fish in it, it counts. So you can start with a shrimp cocktail, crab dip. That's 2 right there. I like doing a red sauce with all kinds of seafood in it. So you can count each different mussels.
Oh, that's cheating.
No, not
That's
cheating. It's all a question of how good it is.
Do you make the bacala?
Nah, I don't. I don't.
Okay. I do the spaghetti aioli because
Yeah.
that has the anchovies
Right.
in it.
And the anchovies are. I love anchovies.
Yeah. So you don't know what you're going to be doing this year?
No, my kids everybody was at my house for Thanksgiving, and they all now have in-law
Sure.
activities to do. So we'll see.
Probably.
Me and the dog, me and Tucker.
Well, you have certainly low key is you have my endorsement for low key.
I like low key.
Whatever you want to do. Senator Kathleen Passidomo.
KP.
KP, thank you so much
Thank you.
for joining me today. I really appreciate you, and we can't wait to have you back on again.
Be happy to. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a great Christmas.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam, and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.